All right, welcome to the Unfazed, Unedited podcast, where we provide commentary on complicated topics in an uncomplicated format. I'm Dr. Shauna Payne Gold, and I go by she, her, hers pronouns. And Dr. Lisa, just a quick aside, I realized that we completely stepped right over quote unquote Columbus Day, and I'm okay with it.
Mm.
Like, I'm actually okay with it. I realized this looking on the calendar, thinking to myself, oh, that might be a good day to skip. Okay, well, I'm good with that. So here we
Yeah,
are, at the
here
end of
we are.
October, but we did skip over Columbus Day, not intentionally, but
Didn't the dear
shrug.
leader make some kind of proclamation that changed it back from Indigenous Peoples
Hmm.
Day to Columbus Day? I'm not sure
Hmm.
the history of of how that has shifted back and forwards, but I know that
Hmm.
this dear leader decided that it was absolutely for sure
Hmm.
Columbus Day. And then someone oh gosh, I feel like I don't know who this was. It's someone famous who you will know, but I don't remember their name, made a joke that um he wants to celebrate Christopher Columbus, who's obviously Spanish, while at the same time removing all Latin American and Spanish speaking slash looking people from the United States. So
Of course. Of
yeah,
course. That's the
yeah.
logic. That's the
Mm-hmm.
logic. So,
Mm-hmm.
oh, anyway, I've just concluded that this entire administration's agenda is spite. That's just what it is. It's just spite. It's not an agenda. It's just let me respond in the most spiteful, cruel ways possible. And well, let's see what happens. So
Mm-hmm.
here we are.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, we're wrapping up October at this point now without having given the Columbus guy any airtime. So I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. But let's dive into the word of the week.
All right, so this is a new one. I shocker was listening to a podcast. I know that you will all be floored by that revelation. And it was an interview. The person being interviewed was a woman who has studied authoritarianism and autocracies. So she's a historian. And she brought up the term anocracy, anocracy, anocracy. And it wasn't something I'd ever heard of, but what it is it's a system of government that is kind of in the betweensies, right? So it has some democracy and some autocracy. Another name you might have heard is semi democracy. Um, and it's where authoritarian powers are combined with some democratic practices, for example, holding elections. So this was a word that struck me. She had used it to describe the United States, and I thought that that was a pretty good assessment. So I don't know if you've ever heard of the word anocracy, but if not, it is a new option for your vocabulary in
Mm,
describing where we are at.
hmm. Well, and I appreciate you keeping up with this language because I realize that sometimes with these words, I am not by any means saying that these are, oh, pie in the sky made up words, but it's like a literal attempt to describe
Hmm.
what's familiar from history, but still new to us at the same
Yeah,
time. And so I
yeah.
appreciate the changes in language over time, or at least bringing back to life some language that we have not in our lifetimes seen, and some of
Hmm.
us our grandparents' lifetime has not seen. And so I appreciate the changes in language, but the semi-democracy in that just tickled me so because you and I have talked about, what the American dream could, should, would possibly
Hmm.
be.
Hmm.
Still acknowledging fully that we're not there and maybe we need to redefine it. And so that
Yeah.
semi-democracy sent me back to that whole, oh, maybe we're in a semi-American dream here. Maybe like with all of it, as far as
Hmm.
both the process of democracy and the product of democracy. It's semi anything that most people dreamed of, even for the architects of this country that certainly did not include you and I, it's still not their dream either for the
Right.
people that they were specifically dreaming for. White,
Hmm.
male, certain socioeconomic status, it's still not that for them either necessarily. So this is an interesting word. I'm gonna grapple with.
Yeah. And what I like about it is whether you say semi-democracy or anocracy, is it captures that middle ground. And I think some
Yes.
people struggle
Yes.
at being clear-eyed about where our system of government is, and it feels
Mm-hmm.
too much or too difficult to say it is an autocracy or an
Mm-hmm.
authoritarian regime,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or a dictatorship. And so I like that this kind of creates some middle ground that we are on the way there. I think we're further along, but certainly
Yeah.
it captures that middle
Yeah.
space.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because it is complicated.
Extremely.
Yeah.
Yeah, extremely. Absolutely. Well, look, we're going to keep on tracking this language here. Like I'm such a visual learner that I'm sure some linguist and political scientist has clashed in some way to make sure there's like a visual tree of all this
Oh, I
language
bet.
that we
I bet.
it's got to be out there somewhere to help
Yeah.
me out here because it's so much to track, but good because I feel like we're striving to get closer to what
Mm-hmm.
describes our lived experience here. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
all right, well, let's dive into phase one. All right, Lisa. So I know that a lot of listeners either don't track the NFL and or flat out boycott the NFL. However, this is a good conversation to bring up in regard to all the people that may never be NFL fans, but they really like good entertainment. I mean, the halftime show is sometimes a bigger deal than the game in and of itself. Like
Yeah.
people will
Yeah.
remember the halftime performance before they remember who even played, much less who won, any of that. And so it was recently announced that Bad Bunny is going to be the halftime performer for Super Bowl 2026 in February, usually the first weekend in February here in the US. And so this has been, I'm talking about one of the biggest splashes in the news in a while because we know that in the context that we're in right now, Lisa, you and I have used this analogy of it's one thing to light a match anywhere, but it's another thing to light that same match at a gas station. There's always been a bone of contention around whoever is selected as the halftime performer. There's one
Mm-hmm.
faction that loves them, one that hates them, one that,
Yep. Yep.
oh, pick somebody else. Oh, this one was the best ever. This one, all of that. I get that. But this is to another level because Bad Bunny is a global icon when it comes to music. And what I think is very interesting is that there is this whole conflation now ironically, between a U.S. citizen performing at a Super Bowl halftime, now being kind of the poster child for people's feelings around immigrants and non-U.S. citizens when
Right.
it really has nothing to do with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
let me give you a little just quick bio on Bad Bunny. So recently, I just spent some time. I said, forget all the work. I sat down, turned on Netflix, and lo and behold, Happy Gilmore 2 was on Netflix, which I felt like, okay, this is going to be super hilarious because I was around to see the first one in 96.
Mm-hmm.
I know that ages
Mm-hmm.
me tremendously. I'm okay with that. And so I kept wondering who this really cool character, Oscar Mejias, was. He was a caddy for Happy Gilmore. And I realized that this was Bad Bunny in costume,
Oh,
right?
okay.
Which was hilarious. I mean, he really played a great part. And so he was recently in the movie. Now we get this announcement. Oh, no, let me not skip over his residency in Puerto Rico that he's had for a while now, a
Yep.
really
Yep.
lucrative residency. And now being announced as the halftime performer by Jay-Z's Roc Nation. He's the one that's kind of the live music entertainment strategist for the NFL to make the final decision on whoever performs. And so as soon as he was announced as the performer, I'm thinking, okay, this is very interesting how much of a knee-jerk response from the four-letter faction that shall not be named on this show due to bots. because they're the ones that are like, no, we want a quote unquote American to do the halftime show, which,
Mm-hmm.
hello, can we go back to US civics and government to realize that Puerto Rico has a very fraught relationship, but is still related to the US as a territory?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it is so frustrating to hear these factions. And so even now, we realize, of course, here we go again with the contrarian posturing. Of course, there's a certain group of folks that I mentioned before, including a certain group whose leader is no longer with us, that has decided that they're going to do the quote all American halftime show as an alternative to Bad Bunny's performance, right? And so I'm thinking to myself, ooh, this is really interesting. And Bad Bunny is taking it all in stride because he was recently on
Mm-hmm.
SNL and he did kind of a start, which was so hilarious. Um, in Spanish, he says a number of different things, but then at the end of it, he also says in Spanish, if you don't understand what I just said, you have 4 months to learn. And I just giggled over that whole thing because he's making light of it, knowing that it's bigger than just him. The
Yeah.
issue is not him. He even mentions in Spanish, this is more than my achievement, it's everyone's achievement, proving that no one can ever erase or take away Latino's mark on or your contribution to this country. And so, with that, Lisa, I think what's interesting is okay, here's what's not new controversy over the halftime performer. That's
Right.
not new.
Right.
What's not new is using halftime shows as a platform for one's career. Because guess what, y'all? They don't get paid. Okay. The NFL covers the performance and flying them to and from the performance, but they don't get a check for performing. Right. So that's not new. What's not new is what happens after one performs. You have increased sales and streams of your music, brand partnerships, all these different career opportunities that may not have been there if one wasn't on such a big platform. And here's what's also not new as well. They want an all-American halftime show. There's been a laundry list of folks who have performed at the NFL halftime who were legitimately not American,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
everybody loved them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, given that, Lisa, I'm cackling because once again, it's the pissing in the wind cartoon that I love all the time when I see 45, 47. It's like you think that you're making a stink about Bad Bunny's performance when actually all it's going to do is benefit him in the end. And I'm all for a Latino
Yeah.
brother being benefited in
Yeah.
the end. And so, Lisa, I know you're, you know, hands off with the NFL and probably even hands off with current performers because I am as well. I cannot say that I'm like this Bad Bunny follower. But at the same time, look, I'm out here
Mm-hmm.
supporting the culture. Okay. Like I've seen so many posts of African American folks, of LGBT folks, of all different groups that he has advocated for that are like, look, all I know is adios, and I am still supporting this man's performance. I know no Spanish, and he intends to do the entire performance in nothing but Spanish, and the culture is supporting him. So I'm wondering how all this lands on you, considering that, you may or may not watch the halftime show, and that's cool as well. I think last year you only watched Kendrick Lamar because I told you it was cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So how does this land on you, given our conversation from last year and now this context?
Oh, it's just so ridiculous. So I heard about this controversy,
Uh-huh.
and so I watched this little video on either YouTube or Instagram, I can't remember, but it was a right-wing podcaster, a woman whose name I don't remember. There's a surprise. Lisa doesn't remember her name. Um, and she was interviewing presumably some other person on the right. I don't know who that was either. Um, but she was the podcaster was all angry about Bad Bunny and was asking the person she was interviewing, so what do you think about this Bad Bunny thing? Isn't it awful? Isn't it a travesty? Whatever, whatever, right? And the person being interviewed was just kind of shrug. She's like, I don't really care. I think it's being blown out of proportion, and it's whatever, right? It's a business decision or something. She was just like very flat and not interested in it. And then the podcaster was like, but he's not even a US citizen. And the person being interviewed was like, kind of frowned and looked at the podcaster and was like, he's from Puerto Rico. He's a US citizen, dear. And it was the added dear at the
Dear.
end that just made me laugh so hard. And then that was when the clip ended. So I don't know where it went after that. But I was just like, oh my gosh. So you're like, this is not going to be like a bleeding heart liberal that you have on your podcast, right? Because it's an echo chamber. So this is someone who
No, not at
presumably
all.
is on the right also, and she's just like not concerned that Bad Bunny is going to be the halftime show singer, and also, um, she's like, yeah, he's really famous. Like he's really famous. Like I get it, right? And then also had to correct the person. I mean, that's just this is where my mind gets blown, Shauna. I mean, I know you and I have talked about kind of the lack
Yeah.
of education. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I can't remember whether I've said this before, but civics is only
Yes, yes.
required, I think, in a handful of states, maybe like 12 states, and then in another handful of states,
Mm.
it's optional, and then in another handful of states, it's just not there's not even mentioned, right? So we've got the generations of people growing up who have no information to the
No
point where
idea.
you have no they don't know shit about Puerto Rico. And to your
Mm-mm.
point, yeah, it's a fraught history, but it's a US
Mm-hmm.
territory, and they are US citizens, right? So it's just
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
they don't have the same rights and privileges, which is part of the fraught
That's
nature.
part of the fraud nature. That's right.
um
That's right.
yeah, so I
That's
just kind of
right.
feel like that person being interviewed, like shrug. Like I don't know. I mean, I understand why you're getting your knickers in a twist because it's a
Mm-hmm.
your early point in this phase, it's being contrarian, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
finding a problem where there
Mm-hmm.
really isn't one.
That's right.
Um,
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah, and
Exactly.
then I'm looking down your list in our notes here of all the people who are not US born, and I'm like, oh, you have Paul
Yeah.
McCartney, you have the Rolling Stones, right? They're British. And then I see
Yeah.
Shania Twain. Is Shania Twain not a US citizen?
I believe no, 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 born. She was Canadian born. Now, I don't know what her citizenship, but she's Canadian born.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
Sting, Coldplay. I mean, many of these are white dudes, right? So if Bad Bunny
Mm-hmm.
were a white dude, I'm sure there would not be the same outrage.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Exactly.
so it's just outrage for the sake of outrage. And you know, the NFL is not as much. I
Mm-hmm.
do not love the NFL,
Right. Exactly. There,
but
we
they
got
are,
problems. That's another
yeah,
podcast. But yes, I'm with you.
but
Yes.
they are not stupid. This is a
Mm-hmm.
global phenomenon. Like he is
Oh yeah.
so famous. They're
Oh
like,
yeah.
we
Super
can get
famous.
Bad Bunny, do our half. Yes, please, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Sign on the dotted line, right?
Exactly. That's
Yeah,
right. That's right. Well, and she's so to your point too, Shania Twain, which again, a lot of people don't know, to your point, she's a Canadian citizen born in Windsor, Ontario, and raised in Timmins, Ontario. And so, yeah, she has this tie to, clearly she had a major influence in the US, but she's not US born either. But again, I think, again, based on this entire conversation, not one iota of what we've said is a problem with Bad Bunny himself. My problem now is the posturing of both ignorance around it, even informed ignorance. Like you're
yeah,
choosing
yeah,
to stay contrary, like even
yeah,
with new information, right? We talked about this on a previous podcast where, what happens when you're educated and informed on a topic, then obviously that should then change your perspective.
yeah.
But these people are just adamant that this man is not a US citizen and they refuse to absorb new information to be contrarian. Like the,
Mm-hmm.
the woman that, the deer just cracks me up. The fact that this new information was introduced and the person doesn't have a change in perspective, that to me, we've talked about posturing. I'll stop right there. That type of posturing is so problematic with new information. Because I'll be
Yeah.
honest with you, Lisa, having not traveled very much, I didn't even get on a plane until I was 21 years old. So knowing that Puerto Rico was a U.S. territory, I did not learn that until I was in college reading the book that I tell y'all about all the time, Lowen's Lies My Teacher Told Me.
Mm,
Even then, as a college student, I'm not ashamed to say that. But once I learned that information,
yeah.
that changes my perspective on how I engage with history. There's no shame in not knowing something and then finding out. To me, it's shameful to find out and then just not give a damn because you're so obstinate that you want to be right.
Yeah, it's a
It's
I,
convenient. It's convenient,
well,
especially during these immigration conversations.
and it's this outrage economy, right? So the people who are
Yes.
who have been loudest in opposition to this are the folks that are looking
Mm-hmm.
for clicks and
Mm-hmm.
subscribers, and so I don't know that it's necessarily representative of
Mm-hmm.
a particularly large group of people, but it's the ones that have the platforms that can rile people up and create, and then profit off of that outrage
Yeah. Yep.
economy.
Yep.
And I also think for some folks, and this is not necessarily just about people who are ideologically on the right. I think this is true about anyone who is kind of very ideological in the way that they live, is that it then becomes such a part of their identity when they're faced with new information that
Mm-hmm.
destabilizes that. It's not just about integrating new information and then moving forward. It's like a threat to who I am as a person, my whole self.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm just gonna ignore it, right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I made a little note here, Lisa. We always come up with new ideas on things. We may need to table and have an entire episode just on outrage economy because
Mm,
some folks that may not be like top of the lexicon here, but it's
yeah,
something where you may be feeding into it and not even realize that you
right.
are. And so
Yeah.
I think we should certainly name that at another time. But absolutely, absolutely. Looking for something to be frustrated with, ticked off with,
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
forth. And I'm thinking to myself, out of all the former performers, now you want to pick on this one. Interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, well, I will leave it there, but Lisa, just know that from complete spite, I will be watching the halftime show
Yeah, I will probably watch it too if I remember,
just
just on
because I want
purpose.
the
Yeah.
ratings, just because I want the ratings to be like through the roof, hopefully, as far as streaming, because I'm not sure. I need to look and see, NFL's they're going to get their coins, and so certain, yeah, certain games are streamed on
They're gonna
certain
make bank
platforms.
off of
So
this.
oh,
Yeah.
ridiculous. But
Yeah.
I was listening to some retired NFL players on their podcast say the very same thing that you're saying, Lisa, is that this is business genius because if you're the NFL that's now playing in Ireland and Brazil, all these different places where you're trying to expose folks to
Yep.
American football,
Yep.
then you want a global star to help you do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's just
Hmm.
good business. I
It
mean,
is.
gracious. And so, with that, I think this is going to get interesting, given that we are not, American football is not even close to global football,
Hmm.
soccer,
Hmm.
if you will. And so, with that, they're trying to get more of their targeted market, which is the
Yep.
world now. So,
Yep.
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 So, all right. Well, look, let's get into phase two.
Okay, so I want to get on Lisa's soapbox. So we have, we're just finishing up the first month of the new Supreme Court of the United States term, and so I just wanted to cover. There's lots going to happen, and I'm sure I'm going to come back to this, Shauna. But there are two cases in particular I just wanted to bring up for discussion. So both of them, they were argued a week apart. The first is a case coming out of Colorado. Yay! I feel like we have always have the homophobic,
Every time.
anti-LGBT
Every
cases.
time.
Yep. So in Colorado, there is a ban preventing licensed clinicians from using conversion therapy on minors. So for those who don't know, conversion therapy is a therapeutic intervention where the person is essentially trying to convert a gay person back to being straight as though that is, a thing that can happen. And anyway, as a therapeutic intervention, it's been widely debunked. It's pseudoscience. It doesn't have a lot of basis in fact. I mean, there's just mountains of literature that shows that it doesn't quote unquote work, and also causes tremendous harm for young people. I mean, harm to the point where people die by suicide based on how this kind of conversion therapy makes people feel. The Colorado law carves out religious figures and like friends and family. So, like, if you're not a licensed therapist, licensed through the state, then the ban on conversion therapy for minors doesn't apply, right? Because they knew that they would run into freedom of speech and freedom of religion issues. So, there are 23 other states that have these bans. And a clinician in Colorado Springs challenged this, saying it was a violation of her freedom of speech, the First Amendment, as in it's talk therapy. So if I am a therapist and Shauna is my client, I'm talking with you the whole time. Therefore, because it is 100% speech, quote unquote, pure speech, any state government intervention into that would be a violation of my First Amendment rights. And Colorado argues you are a licensed practitioner. You have to go through all this training. You have to get a license through the state, and you have to demonstrate that you meet standards of care. And conversion therapy for minors does not meet that standard of care because it is a debunked therapeutic intervention. Therefore, we get to ban it, right? Because it's much like medical practice in that medical doctors don't just get to say anything they want, right? And cause harm. Like, there's regulation around that. Anyway, so that case was argued, and I listened to it, and I do not have good feelings about it, Shauna. I think it's going to get struck down,
Oh
which means
gosh.
that will mean all the other states, those bans go as well. So let me get your thoughts on that before I jump into
Uh,
the second case.
well, my first initial thoughts, certainly not being a legal expert by any stretch of the imagination, my first thought is, well, it negates the notion that wait a minute, if somebody screenshots my body language right now, they know that I'm like, yeah, going through it. Let's
Head
thinking
in the
about this.
hands, head in the
Yeah,
hands.
exactly. No, but to the point, if we're talking specifically about speech, and if they're trying to if they're trying to water this down to speech, it makes it seem as if pure speech cannot be harmful. And we know in this country, there are certain words, phrases, lots of things that we have considered as, for example, hate speech, which is by its root definition harmful to someone. And so to me, I'm like, this is interesting that there may be an allowance for speech that is harmful, but shit, we're living in a country right now where our own president has used speech about medication that
Mm-hmm.
will also be harmful to people. So I
Right.
can't say that I'm surprised, but at the same time, pure speech, it makes it seem like speech has no value when we know it does have value.
Yeah, I mean, this is the downside of having a First Amendment, right? Because
There you go.
you can't regulate hate speech. Like, hate speech isn't a thing
Exactly.
constitutionally,
Hmm.
right? So
Yeah,
I
you may
can
be
go
able to
out and
name it, but you can't regulate it.
right. And so that's kind of the same
Hmm.
principle that they're arguing
Hmm.
here. Whereas Colorado
Hmm.
is saying, well, no, this is speech within the context of a licensed profession. There was a ton more
Hmm.
arguments, but you're right. Like, they're arguing that it's not harmful and that families come to this therapist and
Hmm.
her speech is chilled because of fear of prosecution. The other point I guess I will say, Shauna, is
Mm.
that no clinicians have been investigated or prosecuted under this Colorado law, and it came in 2019.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
So
Gotcha.
there's the other piece being like,
Hmm.
is the threat, quote unquote, that she feels real and justified, right? Because she's
Well,
saying
but
yes.
isn't but that has I mean, I may be hyperbolic around this, but from what I recall, especially from 303 Creative, these cases have been just that, especially from Colorado. These cases have been preemptive strikes of
Yeah.
just in case you try to tell me who I can
Yep.
bake a cake for or not, I'm just gonna make sure that we square
Yep.
this out through the Supreme Court. Like it always seems to be preemptive. in case you want me to do something, I'm going to make it clear that I'm not going to do it. Or in case you want to bar my right to do something, I'm going to make this clear via law, via law. And so with that, I'm like, the preemptive, it goes right
Mm,
back to what
hmm.
you've always mentioned, Lisa, about the cruelty is the point. On one hand, they make it seem as if they're protecting their rights, but they're protecting their rights through harm that was unprovoked.
Yeah. Yeah.
Preemptive. That preemptive part is just killing me here. Goodness.
Yeah, and you're like, technically, if you don't have a case or a controversy, then there's
Right.
nothing for the Supreme Court or any court to rule on, right? So in
That's
303
right.
Creative, you may all
That's
remember
right.
that is that web
Mm-hmm.
designer case from a couple of years ago. Same thing,
Mm-hmm.
no case or controversy. Technically, no case or controversy here,
None.
but that doesn't seem to matter anymore, especially when it comes to
Exactly.
LGBT rights, you know?
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Exactly. Yep.
there's another case coming up related to, I think book banning. I think book banning might be on
Mm.
the docket, this Supreme Court thing, again related to LGBT related
Oh
materials.
goodness. Yeah, and LGBT materials are the overwhelming majority of the book ban cases, even beyond race, based
Yeah.
on ALA. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a big one.
So we'll see. Okay, so that's that one. And then the other one
Mm-hmm.
that was argued is called Louisiana versus Calais, and this is about the Voting Rights
Mm-hmm.
Act. So I will
Okay.
note that we are in what, 65 was
Mm-hmm.
the voting rights. So it's
Mm-hmm.
60-year anniversary 2025 of the Voting Rights Act, which was, for those who don't know,
Mm-hmm.
fundamental in creating a more equal and perfect union, shall we say, because up until that point, a significant portion of the population, African American people, Black people, descendants of enslaved people, were limited in their voting capacity, shall we say. That's putting it politely. And so the 65 Voting Rights Act was just so important. And there are two sections, two big sections, and I always get these backwards. Let me just make sure I have in my notes here that I have this right. So there was a case in 2013, Shelby County versus Holder, and that was Section 5, I think. Yes, Section 5, and Section 5 dealt with pre-clearance, and then there was, meaning if a state wanted to change its electoral regulations, it had to get pre-clearance through the Department of Justice. And to determine which states needed pre-clearance, there was like a formula based on their historic record of voter and racial discrimination, right? In 2013, that part of the Voting Rights Act got overturned. And John Roberts famously said, although this wasn't his phrase, I guess this was said by someone else, but he said it, if you want to end, oh no, maybe, oh, now I'm making that up. But it was, if you want to end racial discrimination, you have to stop discriminating on the basis of race. I thought that, I was thinking that came from Shelby County, but it might actually be related to an affirmative action case. Not the most recent one, but another one. Anyway, beside the point, that's what he thinks, right? Like, that's how you end racial discrimination, is to stop discriminating on the basis of race, because it's that simple, right? Because we have equal playing fields. Anyway, the case that's coming up now is Section 2, which allows for the creation of minority majority districts. So to ensure that people of color in a state have the opportunity to elect representatives who will really represent them, and are not kind of gerrymandered out of their franchise, you create county districts, voting districts based that take race into account. Now, get this, Shauna. Ah, a group of non-minority voters, so white people, have challenged Louisiana because they're saying that it is, they have created these two opportunity districts solely on the basis of race, and that is a violation of the 14th and 15th Amendment, right? Like racial discrimination, because as though these Reconstruction amendments, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, were created to protect white people, right? Like the historic record is that those amendments were created specifically to protect and provide the franchise and to end slavery for Black African Americans. And now this is the upside down of the situation that we are in, is that you have white people claiming racial discrimination.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
So there's a lot more to it, but essentially, if this section 2 gets struck down,
Mm-hmm.
then it will basically be the death of the Voting Rights Act, because Section 5 and Section 2 are the biggest things. So when 5 went away in 2013, people were still
Mm-hmm.
like, it's not over. We have Section 2,
Two. Yeah, that's right.
right?
That's right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if that
Mm-hmm.
goes down, then we are in a pretty bad place, because then we've got no pre-clearance or oversight of this
Mm-hmm.
gerrymandering or electoral changes like
Mm-hmm.
voter ID laws, et cetera, et cetera. That's not happening anymore. And then there's no requirement that states ensure that their racial minorities have an opportunity to elect representatives of their choosing, right? And the thing with Louisiana is they have 6 congressional districts, so 6 representatives, and
Mm-hmm.
they so there's it would be, and a third of the state is made up of Black Americans, so that would be 2 seats, right? And prior to this
Mm-hmm.
issue, they only had 1 seat. And so that they were court mandated to redraw and get a second district, and that is what
Mm-hmm.
precipitated this case.
Yep. Yep.
So I'm guessing you
Yep.
have all the feels about this.
Oh, I got a whole lot of feels about this one because, as soon as you said Louisiana, I was like, oh, here we go, here we go, here we go. And the reason why I say that is because, not in a slight to Louisiana at all. I'm thinking historically, knowing that there is such a diverse history in Louisiana proper, because of ports and so forth there, that, the French and Africans, there is a great mixture there, a great mixing bowl there, which means that Louisiana has always had its major challenges. And so that's one thing historically. But, this other piece of things, again, when thinking about the voting rights, this short-sightedness, the first thing I thought of as soon as you said the 60th anniversary of the VRA, thinking about that more recent article that Nicole Hannah-Jones wrote
Mm,
about how 45, 47 has, presumably wiped out about 60 years worth of progress in a
yep.
number of
Yep.
eras. And this is just one more thing to add to
Hmm.
that list. And so, given that, gerrymandering is real, and at the same time, I always feel like when these types of cases come up, I don't have a good feeling about it either, Lisa.
Mm,
And the reason why is because we have seen how history is either disregarded entirely
hmm.
on the worst note, and on the best note, underestimated. And so, given that, when you have this many decades of lack of accountability around race, racism, all the isms in that particular area, and when it comes to specifically the slave trade and some other historical challenges that happened in that area of what is now the United States, it always makes it seem like we're starting the race at the same start line. And that's simply
Right.
not true.
Right.
You don't have to be a professional historian to know that that is not the case. But it always feels like, oh, well, let's not acknowledge that because it shouldn't be relevant right now, or we need to be concerned about who it makes feel bad for their advantage rather than being concerned about who is actually treated bad because of the history that we don't want to acknowledge. All of that folds into this. And so, my fear is what precedent this will begin to create to roll back in
Right.
other states. That is my, unprofessional, not completely legalese version of this, is what is this going to precipitate moving forward in other states? Because you know what's going to happen.
Hmm.
The non-minoritized groups, since you use that language, the non-minoritized groups all over the country will latch on to this and say, oh, we have a precedent. Now let's roll it on through the rest of the country. I can see that easily happening. Easily happening. Easily.
Yeah, and that non-minority group language, that's actually how they are identified in the court
Hmm.
filing. It's so ridiculous. Like they don't say white. And so this is
But you see, they don't use global majority,
no, no.
which would be more accurate. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, like the so This is
That's
a quote, and
intentional.
I have a quote here, but I don't know where I got it from now. I think it's from one of the links that I put in the show notes, but it says that
Uh-huh.
the plaintiffs are claiming that attempting to address racial discrimination under Section 2
Mm,
is itself discriminatory and violates the 14th and 15th Amendments, the very
mm,
constitutional provisions adopted in the wake of the Civil War to protect against racial discrimination, including in voting, right? And it's racial
mhm.
discrimination against Black Americans. It's not racial discrimination against
Exactly.
white Americans, which to your point is just these arguments are just
Hmm.
to use a recent judge in relation to troops
Hmm.
going into Portland are
Hmm.
untethered from reality,
I know that's
right?
right. Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
and I think your worry about how this will proliferate is 100% because when that Shelby County decision came down, I think something like within
Hmm.
hours or days of that decision, a gazillion
See? Hmm.
electoral process changes
Were
were
filed.
made
Yep.
in
Yep.
many, many states, mostly southern states. So it was things like closing down places where you can get identification,
Of
voter
course.
ID laws, but not allowing certain voter ID. So you couldn't have a public housing identification, but you could
Hmm.
have a gun license identification, right? Like things like
Yeah.
that. So all of these just like, so I think
Hmm.
you're 100% right to worry that it is just going to be, I mean, disenfranchisement is happening and it will just
Yes.
be on steroids after if this
Yes.
case
Yes.
goes the way we think it
Absolutely.
will. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I wouldn't be surprised. And your quote came directly from NAACP Legal Defense Fund, where
Okay.
they were specifically saying that. I did a quick search.
Okay.
But yeah, it's my fear is again the precedence, because up to this point, think about it, Lisa, up to this point, especially during the civil rights movement in this country, folks were trying to speak to an unprecedented time. And so there were
Right.
precedents created, but then those precedents were then completely flipped. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and you used the phrase upside down earlier. I feel like that's what continues to happen here is that, I mean, we can see it around all the big cases that have currently happened recently.
Yeah.
Lisa, you and I both know that we did not assume that you and I in our lifetimes would see Roe v. Wade turned
Right.
upside down. We just
Yep.
we thought that it was solidly in place.
Mm-hmm.
And so now it's like, okay, it very much reminds me of a scene. I know this is a little bit of a tangent, Lisa, but it very much reminds me of a scene where when Ryan Coogler was filming Black Panther, Killmonger was in T'Challa's chair, his throne, if you will. And the videography starts out with it upside down, where the chair and the person sitting in the chair was upside down. And then the videography turned it right side up. And that's when you see that it's not T'Challa, but it is, in fact, Killmonger. And I feel like the upside downness of what we're experiencing right now is exactly that. It's, oh, well, we
Yeah.
thought that this was more firmly in place, but oh, when we actually
Mm-hmm.
get into vision what we're looking at, we cannot take anything for granted anymore as to what's in place and what's not.
Yeah.
And here we are.
100%. Because the VRA has been reauthorized many, many
Hmm.
times in a bipartisan way, right? Like, so this
Hmm.
isn't just something that's been reauthorized by Democrats. Um, and so you look at a law that was so important and is acknowledged as being so important and has been
Yeah.
supported by people across the ideological spectrum for decades.
Yeah.
It's
Hmm.
not surprising to me that we would think it was sacred, right?
That's right. Exactly. Exactly. We thought, but given absolute power corrupts absolutely. That's all I keep
Yep.
thinking,
Yep. Yep.
that it just does. And so I don't want to take anything completely for granted anymore.
No. No.
Yeah.
So I guess after all that, pay attention. These
Yeah. Yeah.
cases will be the answers to these cases, or the opinions rather, will be released
Hmm.
in June of 2026. So we won't hear on them
Mm.
because they're pretty controversial. I'm fairly sure that SCOTUS is going to
Mm.
wait until the last week or two of their session next year. I would be shocked if these cases came out sooner than that. They might, but my guess is it'll be June next year.
Oh Lord, what a Juneteenth announcement that would be. Oh, by the
Wouldn't
way,
it? Oh my God. And by the way, yeah, we've essentially stripped voting rights from African Americans and other people of color, right? So it's like
exactly.
really, yeah, yeah.
Oh, keep in the fight, y'all. Keep in the
Hmm.
fight. I know NAACP Legal Defense Fund, probably ACLU, and a few other organizations. I always, Lisa, you know me, I try to give people something to do as a result of this. Please don't feel completely hopeless if you know that certain agencies that you support are, in fact, fighting this and you have a few extra pennies, throw them their way
Yep,
because they're going to
yep,
need it for the legal representation to fight this tooth and nail,
yep.
so that the folks of Louisiana and the rest of us don't have to experience this moving forward. So, oh goodness. All right. So, with that, that's it. That's a wrap on this week's episode of Unfazed Unedited. You can certainly continue to follow us on social media and your podcast app, whatever your favorite
Hmm.
podcast app is, at Unfazed Unedited with the brackets around the first un. Email us at info@unfazedpodcast.com if you have questions, thoughts, concerns, or just look, throw another word of the week our way. How about that?
Yep, yep.
But you can find everything you need to contact us at unfazedpodcast.com. So if you like this week's podcast, please subscribe, leave a review, share with your friends, coworkers, or any others in this phase of your life. So until next time.
All right. See you next time.